are you? Francisco?
Hey, thanks for having me. How's it going?
Man, I was just thinking here, crypto is such an interesting space, right? It looks like the other day we were back in Singapore and we were chatting there during the event, but at the same time, it's more or less like a time lapse, right? Because it feels like yesterday, but also like it was a month ago, and like the whole world changed sometimes in such a small period of time. So but anyway, good to have you here, Kratik. Thank you very much. And welcome to our audience. We are here to the second episode of the tanssi.
Oops,
Um,
we lost Kratik.
oh, yeah. But just to give a quick intro, so we are here to the second episode of the tanssi, and today we're going to be talking about super interesting topic as well, liquid risk-taking. And Kratik is probably one of the main specialists about the subject in the space. So hopefully he can get back soon so we can get started. Okay, so yeah, we are just trying to put Kratik here online. But I'm just gonna start by giving a quick intro, right? So, oh, here he is. Hey, Kratik. I just made a very quick intro. I was just telling to our audience that, I mean, today we're going to be talking about this super fascinating topic and very hot topic, by the way, in the space, liquid risk staking, right? And you probably, in the Renzo team, you guys are probably one of the main players and the main specialists in the industry to talk about that. So we are super excited. And yeah, to kick it off, maybe Karthik, can you just introduce yourself to the audience and talk a little bit about what you guys are doing in Renzo and how was the process to come to this idea and solve this actual problem in this new part of the space, so to say, so the risk-taking part?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Thiago. Hey, everyone. I'm Kratik. I'm one of the founding contributors at Renzo. All right, that's the nice preview over here. Um, yeah, I have a formal background in engineering and economics. Used to work at a crypto VC. Before this, for 3 years, took a break after that last year, and I could only take it for. I mean, within 2 weeks, I was back, catching up. With, like as Tiago was saying, like so much happens in like few days. Anyway, so came across restaking, read the original white paper, talked to a bunch of people, especially the team at Eigenlayer in the early days, and realized there were some very solid problem and use cases that we could come in and solve and offer this to our users. The goal at Renzo is to make restaking easy and accessible for everyone. Um, there are a lot of complexities involving with restaking, and the fact that there are a lot of uh, points of decision making that a user always has to make, right? So we started offering Easy ETH almost a year back, Easy ETH on Symbiotic, Easy ETH on Eigenlayer, Easy ETH on Symbiotic, and we're gearing up for the launch of Easy Soul on Solana. Now, I strongly believe restaking is the natural evolution of tech standardization that is happening in crypto. Um, pretty similar as to how in the Web2 tech world. Today, if you want to build an e-commerce website or an e-commerce business, you don't have to bootstrap your own. You have to build your own cloud service, your own hosting. You have to build your own delivery network, your own website, your own payment service. But Amazon had to when they built like their thing 30 years back, right? The reason you can do this so quickly is because a lot of waves of standardization, which is pretty natural in any industry as the industry evolves and matures. And I think restaking is one out of the many very natural evolution of how we are standardizing tech for builders and um, while also aligning economic securities. So this was the broad reasoning behind Renzo and why we wanted to build in this space and offer abstraction on top of restaking.
And nice, super helpful. But and Kratik, like going a little bit further, I think like the restaking, the whole restaking world is relatively new in the industry, right? So can you help us and walk us through like what's a traditional workflow of a restaking like
Got it. So for restaking in general, as I was saying, restaking is a natural evolution of the tech standardization that's happening in crypto. Not very long ago, if you wanted to have your own token, you had to create your own proof of work blockchain, have your own network of miners just to have your own token and then get it listed on exchanges and all of that. Soon we had the ERC20 standard, so all you had to do was click a button and you can deploy your own token. At some point, it was incredibly hard and tedious to launch. Sorry, I think I got cut off for a second. Yeah, not long back ago, we had it was super hard to create your own blockchain and then your own L1, and then Cosmos came up with an SDK. Write a few lines of code and you have your own L1, and the same version that Polkadot had as well. So I think restaking is the next step where as a builder you don't have to worry about, a lot of problems are already solved by the standardization that came before. Now you don't have to worry about bootstrapping your own economic security. You don't have to worry about bootstrapping your own validator set, and you don't have to worry about giving extensive inflationary token rewards just to maintain the economic security that you attracted in the first place. A big problem that we saw a few years back is networks were giving an insane, like 40, 50, 80% inflation on their native tokens just to keep their economic security, which was in itself a volatile, low liquid, low market cap token. And to keep it around, you have to give a lot of inflationary tokens. Now restaking solves all of this. It gives you economic security to begin with. It gives you a validator set to begin with, and it drastically reduces your economic security budget to be able to keep that security amongst your validators. So all these things put together, eventually all this tech standardization leads the industry to a point where builders, all they have to do is focus on the core product, not on the multiple services that you need to make that product function, right? And this is the same, as I was saying, this is the same wave that we saw in every single industry that came before, right? Even the fact that we are on this call, we have to realize a lot of these things were already made available for us to be able to have this call on the internet in a video manner, connecting with all our communities, and the fact that the community themselves can be on any different social media, whether it's Twitter, whether it's on YouTube, and are able to interact with us. So all of these pieces of standardization makes it easy for us to have this call. And a lot of these standardization pieces are necessary in the crypto world as well. Now, coming to your second question, apart from the fact that it's a new shiny thing, apart from the fact that there's a lot of TVL right now, a lot of incentives, and the fact that LRTs are some of the largest assets on chain, some of the most used assets on chain, the fact that they align economics incentives between AVSs, between AVS clients, between the rollups, between the restakers. However, if you're a builder that has nothing to do with DeFi, that has nothing to do with restaking, this is not all that there is to crypto. There's a lot more to crypto than just restaking and DeFi and incentives, right? So if you're a builder and you're building something that's remotely not related, you don't have to worry about this. There's a lot more that you can build and a lot more you can offer to the crypto world. We are expanding in all directions. So I don't think every builder in crypto has to catch up to speed with what's happening. I think it's a very specific sector that we're targeting to.
Interesting. And Francisco, from tanssi perspective, right? So could you top up why is that important? Like how liquid staking is being crucial for our ecosystem going forward?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, as I was saying before, right, ultimately what Tansi's protocol will look like on Ethereum is kind of leveraging symbiotic and complementary products like Renzo to secure, to accrue economic security, right? And it was actually through conversations with the Renzo team, Lucas in particular, that, I mean, we were just starting to kind of get into the restaking ecosystem and landscape, trying to understand the problem sets. And they were actually telling us yeah, I mean, restaking unlocks this primitive, like Kratik was saying, to kind of build use cases where you can leverage Ethereum security and use cases that extend beyond the EVM. But there's still significant friction points for teams, right? I think Renzo's solving a lot of them on the DeFi UX side of things for the end user. But the learnings that we had is that a lot of networks or AVSs or restaked app chains that want to deploy, you still have to go out and do a lot of work, right? When it comes to kind of convincing operators to opt into securing your AVS, after you've kind of convinced an operator set to secure your AVS, you actually need to attract restaked value, the economic security to secure your own network. So for us already, those 2 points, we were like, okay, this is very analogous to what we saw in the app chain space as a whole, right? It's true that like the Cosmos SDK and Substrate made it a lot easier to build chains, but you were ultimately still responsible for kind of bootstrapping your validator set. You had to incentivize these validators with something, like Kratik was saying, right? Usually teams created inflationary models and promised a portion of inflation to kind of secure the chain. So this is kind of where we saw, okay, there's something we can build here where tanssi itself will be a chain based on Substrate that is connected to Symbiotic. We are going to kind of like recruit all these operators to secure our own AVS or network, which will be built as a chain. We'll attract restaked value with the help of projects like Renzo. And then all of these networks or restaked app chains that deploy through tansi's network can tap into this like shared security model that we've created, right? At the end of the day, that's the objective, is just to kind of make it as easy as possible for these developers to deploy their own networks or their own restaked app chains without having to do all this infrastructural work themselves. So in that context, restaking is a crucial component. We're building a lot of these components, like shared consensus, so we'll have our own validators in our own chain, shared sequencing, so we'll have a set of sequencers that are actually producing blocks on behalf of these restaked app chains, but then actually accruing the economic security will go through Symbiotic and Renzo. So that's like a crucial complementary piece of what we're building. Yeah.
Fascinating. Cool. And Francisco, one thing we always discuss internally, right? We usually in crypto, we have essentially two products in every protocol, right? So one is the actual protocol and the utility and everything that we are bringing, like the problems that we are solving. And the other product is the token, right? So the token itself, it has a lot of caveats, a lot of particularities. In that context, Kratik, we are here talking about liquid risk-taking, right? So I think that's very interesting to talk about the token aspect of all of that, right? So by being liquid, that means that like you guys issue a receipt, so to say, right? As you were explaining in the beginning. And this receipt, it's a derivative, and this allows for a whole new world of trading. And as you mentioned, I forgot the number, but this giant amount of combinations that are possible. So I guess my question is like, when we see more, risk-taking players coming, also more AVSs or networks being deployed, this ecosystem becomes very complex, right? And all these derivatives comes like this, all these tokens, which are new products, right? They come and they are tradable. I mean, we are talking about decentralized finance, right? So it's anyone can create a pool to trade one derivative against another one. So it really becomes exponentially more complex to deal with that. So given your background as an investor, Kratik, like, could you elaborate on this whole like new DeFi market, this whole new derivatives market that's being created is being created by the risk-taking protocols, and how do you see all of that combining and like what can we expect, and what can we expect on the trading side also?
Yeah, sorry about that. Okay, so I think what's important to understand here is LRTs are fundamentally different in many ways from LSTs. This is basis on their risk profile, their collateral profile, differentiation by extension of all these virtues, and the fact that new DeFi markets can be created on top of it. So the thing is that with different risk profiles, so the fact that there are 32, if there are only 15 AVSs, there's going to be way more than that. But if there are only 15 AVSs, there are 32,000 ways in which you can create or tailor make an LRT for your users, right? With different risk rewards, with different ERC20s, different collateral sizes, and essentially all those combinations that come in the way of building an LRT. The fact that there are so many the fact that there can be so many LRTs possible, and all of these LRTs have unique ways of differentiating against each other apart from the DeFi integrations makes it a creative playing field for DeFi projects to build on top of it, right? So you have so many so many options as a user. Now you have the world of DeFi that's already created and already evolving at a rapid pace to effectively use these derivatives in, let's say, lending markets and AMMs. Yeah, sorry, I'm back. Yeah, effectively you can use LRDs in multiple existing DeFi protocols, but also the fact that you can this also creates room for new DeFi protocols to effectively use these different LRTs to cater to their users in a unique way, right? We're seeing some interesting projects. Without spilling the beans, we're seeing some interesting projects come up in the last few weeks um, that are built on top of LRTs that leverage the different complexities that LRTs solve and come with for the users. So this will be an interesting field, and I think there's a lot more that can be done on not just DeFi protocols, but also importantly, DeFi protocols on top of rollups that are also aligned with uh, directly or indirectly with the restaking protocols like Symbiotic, like Eigenlayer, etc. So yeah. So to answer your question, I think it's still a new field. It's still super experimentative, but I'm super excited for where we're going and where we're heading in while we're doing all of this.
Kartik, I actually have another question that I'm curious about. Like, I'm just curious about how this is going to evolve in general in the restaking world, because like we're focusing on this talk on like the DeFi ecosystem that's going to be created for the end user and all these different opportunities. What about on the other end of that market, right? Like operators, right? Right now, kind of these vaults are primarily being kind of operated by like blue chip assets, right? How do you think that's going to evolve when we start seeing more kind of these like Oops, I think you guys lost me. Yeah, I was just curious, how do you think that's going to evolve in terms of like once you start incorporating more of these long tail network or AVS assets into these vaults, right? Because it creates a market for operators as well, right? Like where operators don't necessarily know the value of those tokens that they're kind of receiving as rewards. I imagine that there's going to be kind of like an options or futures market that's created for operators to kind of trade in as well. I don't know if you have a better visibility than us in terms of this kind of this landscape. So I was curious, like whether you've observed how that's going to evolve.
Interesting. So yeah, I see the parallels that you're making with Cosmos, which had this like validators having this issue. The way it works with LRTs, as far as these staking protocols are concerned, is let's just assume for illustration purposes, I'm using EZ or Eigenlayer. The way it works on the back end is your restaked ETH or your ETH that is staked and then restaked is delegated to one of the node operators that secures the multiple AVSs or the strategy that the LRT is executing. So what this means is all these validators are working and securing networks, whatever the different networks demand from them, and what's at stake is the collateral that the user deposited. The rewards are then passed on to the users directly. The operators usually take a commission anywhere between, like right now it's hard coded at 10%. It could be variable, but after the commission that the operator takes, all the remaining rewards are passed on to the all the remaining rewards are then passed on to the users. Now the commission that the node operators take is then it's up to the node operators how do they use it. But I do see your point where there could be not necessarily futures markets, but there could be ways that operators would want to delta neutral hedge it, for example, or different ways to meet their operating cost. This is a market, as I was saying, is still very nascent and still new. Like it's barely 2 or 3 weeks old. Restaking rewards, and it only exists on Eigenlayer. So we're yet to see the second order consequences of the way the architecture is designed for restaking protocols.
Yeah, I'll also top up here, like not only the operators, but the builders as well, right? So, I mean, you're building a project, you raise some funds, you have your budget, right? So eventually you don't want to be like just, floating around the market, right? So you want to hedge yourself to kind of, make a better forecast and everything. So I think, yeah, not only for the operators, but also for the builders as well. It's very crucial to eventually we come to that we eventually come to like a derivatives market to hedge the operations, right? And better budgeting, right? So yeah, I think that's definitely a one side of the market that we're gonna see evolving a lot going forward. But cool. We lost Kratik, but I'm gonna make my next question. Kratik, we talking about real use cases, right? And I know you guys also. I remember the panel that you gave back in Singapore about chain abstraction. Maybe that's one of the use case. But like, can you tell me more about use cases, right? Real problems that you guys are solving, and chain abstraction maybe that's a cool one. But anything else that you can bring to our audience to illustrate like actual tangible things that we are seeing in the industry?
Yeah. So yeah, I think good that you brought chain abstraction. So um, essentially, what we noticed almost a year back is the incentive model is very well built for restakers, AVSs, and restaking protocols. But there is a point that is often neglected in the early days of building, is the fact that Eigenlayer, for example, as a service, or Symbiotic as a protocol, is building or hosting all these middleware services like data availability, shared sequencing, interoperability protocols, all of which are built to empower and support rollups in a better way, right? Um, the problem is, the more successful these middleware services are, the juicier will be the restaking yield on mainnet, right? Since restaking almost exclusively exists on mainnet, um, the more successful these services are that service rollups, the higher will be the yield on mainnet for restaking. What this means is, by a second order consequence of restaking, is sucking the very TVL and the very capital, the very users out from rollups onto mainnet, right? Because since the capital incentives are built in such a way that there's a higher yield on mainnet, so you would just essentially pull all the capital out from L2s on mainnet. So this is a major problem, because then the L2s are effectively not very well aligned with restaking. So what we were trying to build, so we introduced something called native ETH restaking almost a year back, where effectively we deploy smart contracts on rollups that accept ETH and natively mint an LRT on the rollup itself. Now on the back end, we take that ETH, bridge it back to mainnet, stake it, restake it, send the message back to the L2 with our partners at Everclear and Hyperlane to effectively communicate that the loop is complete and now the LRT is fully over collateralized on L2. Now, this might sound like depends, like it could sound complex to some people, it could sound super simple to some people, but either way, the major problem that it solves is it makes restaking possible from L2s without the users or the capital ever having to move to mainnet, while also restaking at a fraction of the cost that you would on mainnet. So this not just makes it um, juicy for capital to not move, but it also incentivizes new capital to come into L2s, because now they can go to L2s and restake for a fraction of the gas cost that they would if they were on L1s. Um, so this aligns not just the users, the restakers, the restaking protocols, the middleware services, but also the clients of these middleware services, which are the rollups. Now, as a bonus, since we're working with Everclear, they developed this super cool open source token standard called XCRC20, which we are using. So XEasyETH, EasyETH's version XEasyETH is deployed across 8 rollups. So apart from all the benefits, the restaking benefits that um, Renzo offers to these L2 users, it also makes it seamless and interoperable to go between any L2 that supports Renzo to any other L2 that supports Renzo. So it just makes interoperability also super seamless and with zero friction. And there, Renzo is the first, and Easy ETH is the first asset that has been deployed on L2s as one singular unifying token standard at scale. So this was a major problem facing facing restaking, that I think LRDs have been pretty successful at solving.
Yeah, by the way, we just announced we are super big fans of them as well. We just announced a collab with Everclear as well. So cool that we are on the same page. And well, we spoke a lot about this infrastructure side, and something we always talk about here in tanssi is like this, yeah, how app chains can also be like supported by restricted assets and AVSs, right? Networks. So, Francisco, maybe do you wanna talk a little bit more about how these real use cases fit into Tansi's roadmap and what we built so far, and what are other types of use cases that we are seeing in Tansi?
Yeah, sure. And I think tanssi is going to bring like a new type of use case to like these restaking protocols, right? I think kind of restaked app chains within kind of the broader AVS/network ecosystem is like restaked app chains is a subset of those. We're starting to discover a bunch of new use cases within Symbiotic. Like there's a lot of like trusted execution environments, ZK provers, off-chain computations that are verified on-chain. We're bringing like a new type of use case as well. Like and Tiago and his team have done a great job in bringing these types of use cases. We're seeing a lot around like real world assets in Latin America in particular. Gaming is another big one. So yeah, these are types of projects that require kind of dedicated block space for the customizability to have like the value capture and the economics of having their own token, but they don't want to deal with like having to bootstrap their own economic security or their own cryptographic security, right? So for them, tanssi is kind of a no-brainer. So yeah, these are the kind of things, and I think for Substrate it aligns very well with this kind of value proposition of networks and AVSs, right? Because I think the value prop there is that you can enable these types of use cases that extend beyond just the EVM, and Substrate is very aligned with this customizability, right? You can pretty much build anything that is modular with Substrate, and that's the underlying tech stack that we're using at tanssi. So we're bringing a lot of these things to bear via Symbiotic as well.
I'm just
Cool.
curious, what makes different virtual machines apart from EVM attractive to these real world use cases, like you mentioned, and like are you seeing some interesting use cases there?
Yeah, I think many of them are using the EVM. They just want to have like a dedicated EVM environment. But there's others like that can't be built with EVM, right? Like decentralized storage is a good example of that, right? Where like building that within an EVM environment is just inefficient.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's some of these use cases that I would say that are adapted to the EVM, but they want to have their own dedicated environment and they like the support that tanssi provides, and others that are not really adapted to the EVM.
Yeah, I think we talk a lot about this in the context of EVM, but now in Solana, we are also talking a lot about the network extensions, right? And I think in that sense as well, if you think about the concept, and by the way, Kyle Samani from Multicoin Capital, he talks a lot about this concept of, you can have this core shared environment that it's great for some stuff, but then you want to have some very specialized features like coprocessors or ZK stuff, other things that are very specialized and that extend the core general purpose chain. So I think that's getting traction even in the Solana ecosystem. So what I would say about this use case that we are seeing, so we are seeing infrastructure on one side, as Francisco said, for instance, storage, that's a cool one. But we are seeing a lot of app chains that are just, credit products, right? DeFi products. But these guys, they want to have their own chains. They want to have their own tokens. They want to have scalability, right? They want to have dedicated block production. So these are usually the key drivers for teams to want to have this type of infrastructure, this type of tech stack. But yeah, I mean, of course, like they are always looking for, building on where the liquidity is, where the activity, the users are. So therefore, they are constantly looking for EVM ecosystems, or they are interested in Solana. And yeah, that's how we are seeing, even in the Substrate chains, right? So builders building with Substrate they are interested in accessing the EVM space. So, but they want to leverage the modularity of the substrate, like the powerful of the power of substrate as a development kit, right? So as a development framework. So we are seeing a lot of this convergence, so to say, in this real world use cases that we are supporting. But cool. So I think probably one of the final questions here, like we are talking a lot about restaking, right? So Kratik, in your vision, why the developers, the builders, they cannot skip this? Why they cannot ignore the liquid restaking? Why does it matter for the developers going forward?
Yeah. So as I was saying earlier, like if as a developer, if you're building anything anything remotely related to building a new coordination network, you would need a validator set, and you would want to consider. Sorry, I just lost my volume. Sorry. Yeah, and you would want to consider getting economic security or renting economic security from a service like Symbiotic or service like Eigenlayer or Jito. If you're a rollup that is using or remote, like using any services that exist within restaking protocols, you would want to align yourself with these restaking protocols with LRTs that not just bring exposure to restaking, but also bring in liquidity and ecosystem to your rollup. However, as I was saying, this is not all of crypto. If you are building something that is completely different and pushing the boundaries of crypto in other directions, um, it might not cater to your use cases. But I believe like a lot of builders that I have personally talked to, also from a selection bias perspective, are in this realm of infrastructure, new infrastructure projects, new coordination networks, new DeFi protocols, new restaking related protocols. So all of these builders have like we are all different pieces of the same puzzle. We all have to come together to execute on our shared vision. Um, yeah. Now, what's next on our side is on Renzo's side is intent based infrastructure. Right now, all of native ETH restaking, as I was saying, is done through liquidity bridges. Now the next step for us is to move to a completely intent-based infrastructure where we are relying on an existing well-developed ecosystem of solvers and taking that support to effectively restake from L2s. The other part of the problem is also end-to-end restaking, which is so we don't just enable restaking from L2s, but the next step is to also allow withdrawals and L2s. And this is where the intent-based infrastructure comes into the picture, where users can simply work with an intent-based based product, like for example Everclear, that can support native withdrawals and native restaking from not just any roller, but literally any chain for that matter that it's uh, integrated with. And then the third part is the permissionless instant deployment of Easy ETH on Easy ETH as an XCRC20 standard on rollups or any other L1. Right now, most of this is done in a controlled setup and a controlled environment. But the next step is to build the rails where this can be deployed in a permissionless manner and offer this to different rollups in our ecosystem. So yeah, hopefully this is something exciting and innovative for builders to want to keep an eye on and work with teams like Renzo and tanssi and Eigenlayer and Symbiotic to deliver.
And Kratik, just like on that point, I'm curious on the problem sets that you mentioned. Are you seeing like these problems just being common across the entire restaking landscape, independently of the restaking protocol, or do you see like Symbiotic, Eigenlayer, Jito? I imagine that the architecture designs behind these protocols are not exactly the same, right? So do you see some problem sets within restaking that are protocol specific, perhaps the Symbiotic or Eigenlayer, or do you see them more being kind of unilateral across the board?
You're right. I think a mix of both. You're right. All restaking protocols have different architecture that they've built to support the teams that they're working with. A lot of problems that come with the trade-offs that they take with the architecture. Some of these problems are also solved in protocol as well, right? Having said that, the core problem of bridging the gap between mainnet restaking and roll-up centric restaking is something that I think. Yeah, I'm back. Yeah, so as I was saying, this core problem will exist in the foreseeable future, and the best way to solve that also is to align with a unilateral, a uniform LRT deployed across all the rollups that you work with.
Got it.
Cool. And looking ahead, right? So maybe Kratik, what can you tell me about the near future and the years to come here? I mean, what are the big next steps for liquid risk-taking in general, or for Renzo? I mean, yeah, and how do you see this impacting the whole Web3 ecosystem as a whole?
Yeah. All right. Yeah. So as I was saying, the three next steps were intense-based infrastructure for chain abstraction, the end-to-end restaking using chain abstraction, and permissionless instant deployment, effectively making Renzo not just the first chain abstracted protocol, but also the first the end-to-end chain abstracted protocol at scale. So that's next steps. In terms of where the restaking ecosystem is going in general, we recently had rewards go live on EigenLayer. This is very, very recent, and the first batch of rewards came in last night um, for securing EigenDA. So this particular feature of restaking is still new. It makes restaking real as we evolve from a points-based ecosystem to real yield, real rewards-based ecosystem. So that's an important first step. The second step is, as more AVSs go live, as more AVSs have real world use cases, this makes it more interesting, and especially with the different combinations for LRTs to secure AVSs along with the payments that they offer. Then there's slashing. That's going to go live hopefully by the end of this year. Slashing makes restaking as real as it gets, because now there's capital at stake for the rewards that you're earning. So that's the full production restaking that we're hoping to go. Like, we're super excited that it goes live super soon. The other thing is Jito restaking is launching very, very soon on Solana. We're the first LRT that's built on top of Jito, built on top of Jito Soul. It's called Easy Soul. It's going to launch on Solana very soon, and along with it, it brings the NCN networks, which is Jito's version of AVSs within Solana. So that's another super interesting thing to look out for, along with stablecoin restaking that Circle is promoting. We're building something called Easy USDC, surprise, with Circle, where we're supporting the next generation of infrastructure networks that are tailor-made and cater to stablecoin economic security and stablecoin rewards with Circle. So these are some interesting things that we're looking forward to, and would encourage everyone to keep an eye out for.
Cool. And Francisco, how should builders get ready for all these shifts in the industry? Like, what's needed? What type of infrastructure is needed? What type of adaptations in the protocols? How do you see all of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think in the future, app chain deployments, roll app deployments are becoming increasingly easy, right? I think it's just going to become commoditized to a certain degree, right? Because not all app chains and roll apps are created equal. So I think we're going to just have like thousands of app chains and roll ups in the future. And it's going to come down to like, what are the trade-offs that you're looking for, right? And this goes back to a little bit what Kratik was saying before, like, even if it is an EVM deployment via tanssi, the underlying properties of the chain that enables that EVM kind of use case might be different than something in a roll-up, right? At tanssi, kind of these restaked app chains, we're not really compromising on decentralization and security, right? Whereas that's kind of an inherent trade-off with building on a roll-up, is that you have this single set of single sequencer. So yeah, I think it's about, at tanssi at least, we want to make the deployment of fully permissionless and decentralized networks as easy as possible, without compromising on decentralization and customizability. And I think chain abstraction will become a huge part of that, right? We're going to be big contributors to this fragmentation problem, because the more kind of app chains are deployed, the more it gets fragmented. And I think it's going to be interesting to see how this like chain abstraction kind of landscape evolves, right? What I'm starting to see is that a lot of these RAS providers, I think, it's a bit similar to kind of the problem that the Cosmos SDK and Substrate maybe had, right? That you may enable the deployment of these chains, but the value accrual back to like the SDK is more difficult, right? So what a lot of these RAS providers figured out is that, okay, in order to accrue value back to kind of the underlying tech stack, they're creating kind of these like meta layers for their own kind of roll-up clusters, right? So we're starting to see kind of ag layer, elastic chain for ZK Sync, the super chain for the op stack. Yeah, pretty much every kind of RAS Caldera has the meta layer now, right? So it's going to be interesting to see how that interoperability kind of standard race plays out. I suspect that there's only going to be a few that win. At tanssi, we don't necessarily have that same issue, right? Because at the end of the day, our protocol is providing shared block production, shared validation. So there's a clear network effect that happens towards the tanssi protocol that these other RAS providers don't have. So we're not necessarily interested in being kind of this interoperability standard. We'd rather kind of plug into the ones that are going to win. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out in the future, for sure.
Yeah, I think specifically with the Unichain, right, the Uniswap announcement recently, I think we are seeing a lot of the community saying that like app chains are the way to go in the future. Like that's really like a very refreshing, like to see this movement in such a big player in the industry. And I think, yeah, if we manage to make really easy to developers to deploy their chains, I mean, there's really no really a big reason to keep developing in a more constrained ecosystem, so to say. But also, like, yeah, of course, this fragment, as I said, we are contributing actually to this problem of fragmenting even more the liquidity. But I mean, there are many cool features and cool like ways to solve that are being developed, right? So we just announced this collab with Cycle Network, for instance. We know that Polygon is doing a great job also in the ag layer. So, and that's one way to solve that, and other ways are gonna, come with time, right? So I think it's gonna be super interesting to see. I would say like this fragmentation of liquidity is really like the piece that's missing a little bit for this for this whole app chain tech stack to take off. So I'm very excited to see how it develops in the days to come. I think we don't have a lot of time anymore, but Pratik, I wanted to pick your brain about one question from the community, which is actually we always hear this question when we talk about restaking, right? And that's, given the fact that it's a very recurrent question, I wanted to take the time to make it. So many people talk about the restaking, and they always get concerned about the potential bank runs, right? For instance, if you have a large way of unstaking requests in the staked assets, so how does it affect the whole restaking chain, right? So let's say if we have a big bank run, so to say, in Lido, right? And staked Steve is going to be like, how does it affect Steve, and therefore the whole supply chain, so to say, of restaking?
Okay, interesting. So if there is a large withdrawal on any LRT, then the end consequence of that will mean that for some AVSs, economic security will go down. So that's a given. So there's no way that you can prevent that, because it's just like cause and effect, where if there's a withdrawal, then economic security will go down. Now, how does it go down is projects like Renzo and, for example, like Ether5, we have something called a buffer built into the protocol. For example, for Renzo, the buffer is 10,000 ETH. So up to a withdrawal request of 10,000 ETH, we can meet that request within 72 hours, because that's the portion of the protocol that is not being restaked or delegated or deposited for a 7-day unbonding period, but instead it can be within 3 days it can go to the user. If the withdrawal is more than 10,000 ETH, then the user has to wait for up to 7 days, up to 10 days, depending on the ETH withdrawal queue, because the ETH will have to get unstaked from the Ethereum. All right, I'm back. So the Ethereum will have to be withdrawn from the Ethereum beacon chain, and then after that withdrawn from Eigenlayer, which has a 7-day unbonding period. So it takes around 7 to 10 days if the buffer has less than the ETH that the user is willing to withdraw or requesting to withdraw. So as a whole, bank runs, like LRTs are not banks essentially, so the concept of bank runs do not like the analogy doesn't make sense over here. Instead, it is like how long does a user have to wait to get their asset back. Effectively, nor are LRTs lending markets where we're taking a user, like an LRT is not taking a user asset and then lending it to someone else and waiting till the borrower pays back to send it back to the lender. It's just ETH that is used to secure chains, and at any point you can withdraw that ETH back. So yeah, that's how the architecture is built like. And for I would encourage the users to like DYOR and don't trust verify about the architecture and find out what a case like a large withdrawal case looks like. For example, like an LRD protocol recently had 250,000 ETH withdrawn in 48 hours, so very recently, and we did not see anything breaking. And I think that's a very important um, demonstration of how LRTs are not effectively built like banks or lending markets.
Cool. Super interesting. Guys, I think we are running out of time. So just to wrap it up, Francisco and Kratik, like, do you have like closing remarks, takeaways, messages to the community, whatever you guys wanna share with the community? Maybe Kratik, you go first since you're our guest.
I would just say to keep an eye out on the Renzo tanssi partnerships and announcements. I think there are some very cool things that we're cooking together, and I'm super excited for when that comes out.
Yeah, no, I mean, on the tanssi side, we're super excited about the collaboration with Renzo. They're an amazing team, and as always, thank you to the community for joining. Keep an eye out for announcements. Reach out to us as always, on Telegram, on Twitter, in case you want to reach out and you need help with. Oops, yeah, you lost me. But yeah, we're always available. So if you want to reach out on Telegram or wherever, if you want to build something, we're happy to support. So yeah, thanks everyone for joining, and thank you, Kratik, as well. It was a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
And Francisco, Kratik, thank you guys. Thank you very much to our audience as well. It's always a pleasure. We are super excited about the tanssi cast in general. Like, we have a bunch of super interesting guests always, and it's always super insightful to share cool stuff that we are building, that they are building, and that we are building together. So guys, thank you very much to our audience and community, Renzo's community, tanssi's community. Thank you very much, guys, and see you all in the next episode. Cheers.